us which one is our educational institution, and of course, each one our educational institution is one of them. So just quick one, I'll just let ask want you to quickly tell us and probably our educational institution. I mean, that's our higher education, and probably solutions that you think might work, considering policies that might come in later or soonest. Thank you very much.
I can hear you very well.
Can you open your video? Why did you lock your video? Hello, Lucy.
Hey, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you open your video? Open your video.
I have a video on.
It's not on yet. I don't know.
I can see myself, so it should be on.
It's lucky. I can't see you. Can you check again? Hello, can you hear? Hello, Lucy.
Yeah.
Are you there now?
Sorry.
Can you hear me?
I really hear you really badly.
Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now so that I can repeat myself?
It's disconnecting a lot.
Can you hear me now? I think it's the network. The network is bad from your end there. Okay, can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you audibly.
Okay, perfect.
All right, that's great. What I'm saying is that I just need you to tell us one or two things about skills. What am I really saying is that the pandemic is here, and it's not going to stay forever. It's going to leave very soon. So what do you think? Or how do you think students can annex the necessary skills needed for them after the pandemic?
Okay.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, perfect.
Hello, Lucy. Hello. Lucy, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah.
What should I talk about?
Do you hear my question, right?
Sorry.
Did you hear my question, right? My question.
I can hear you.
Hello.
Yeah.
Did you hear my question, right?
No, I didn't. Sorry. Can you repeat?
All right. Okay. Now listen. I said the pandemic is here, and it's not going to stay forever. So what I'm trying to say is that what advice would you give to students out there, most especially high school students, on how they can harness their skills, or the skills that will be very, very important after the pandemic? What can you say about that? I observe that you from UK, you are calling to school in there. So what view do you have? Thank you.
So I just start talking.
All right. Okay.
I start or not yet?
Can you hear me now? you can start talking.
Okay. So your question was, what kind of skills do you think will be important after the pandemic is over?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so if I can now start talking, I think I would say that this pandemic has definitely taught us a lot, and we are definitely the first generation of learners that are being faced with so many challenges at the same time. So everything from environmental change to climate crisis to the rise of these non-democratic political systems across the world, and of course, above all, this pandemic that has literally turned the world upside down. So I think this will definitely change our everyday life and our work, the way we communicate, and also shape personal and professional relationships. So I think it is definitely will be important for us to realize that this is a new normal, that it's not something that we should start waiting for the pandemics, for the corona crisis to be over, but we should start working at it now. So I think that one of the biggest challenges that the youth is actually facing right now is that we are not realizing that education and that going to the university or going to high school and getting your diploma there, that this is not something that is like overall, it is the only thing that shapes our future and shapes career prospects. But we should also do something with the science to gain and learn experience, to gain skills, to get these soft skills that are super important. And I think we are kind of stuck in this loop of getting skills that are not recognized by educational system and weren't provided in the educational system. So I think for the youth at the moment, for high schoolers, at the moment, the most important skills are the digital skills. Of course, we are just learners in the digital age, but also that I think one of the things that we should give a lot of more emphasis on is these personal skills, how to shape personal connections, because they're getting lost in this digital world at the moment. But my advice for all high schoolers would be to, and also university students, would be to not only rely on the knowledge that you gain at schools. It is important. It is the base of everything that we learn and everything that we do. But you should also look for experience outside this educational area because they're the ones that are being sought after by the workers and by the job offers, and also to gain a lot more knowledge in this area.
Are you there?
Yeah, I am.
All right. Thanks for this wonderful point of yours. We quite appreciate that. However, before we round it up, I have a question for you, and that is on accountability, which is one of our focus here. What do you think about accountability? What is your advice about accountability to young ones out there, especially international students? What does accountability mean to you? How are they supposed to be conscious of accountability in these trying times and even after the pandemic? Thank you.
In what sense accountability?
Yeah, I mean accountability in access to informations around them.
So which
Because one of the things
information?
that we find difficult is that young one having informations that has to do with getting right skills, getting information about even the academic government policies, another a very vital information. So individuals' accountability to those things differs. Most times, people jettison those informations, while some put a deaf ear to those information. So, what will be your advice, especially in these trying times and even after the pandemic?
Sorry, can you repeat that? It has disconnected.
All right, I said accountability in terms of information around us. Most time we find out that some people jettison some information, while some put a deaf ear to some information, while some do not even have access to those information. Informations on housing, information on government policy, information on legal, and even information of soft skills that are needed. So
Yeah,
that's what I'm.
I think it is very important for youth to gain a lot of different information from different sources. And also, like we talked about before that, about the skills, I think also one of the most important skills for the 21st century would also be that we should know, and especially the youth should know how to how to recognize fake news as to reliable sources. So I think for young people, it is important, yes, that we get sources that we get information from different sources, that we know that these sources are the reliable ones. And even though, what I heard, the problem in the UK was that also there was encouraging to do the classes that are not something that young people would need, or that would help them in the seeking the jobs. So I think that as to accountability, I would say that schools should and must provide the best information they possibly can, and that this information is not just in the good of schools, but this is primarily that is in the good of the students, because schools are the ones where we gain all the knowledge, and are the ones that will help us path our future, and are therefore should be working in the good of the students and not just in their own good.
Thanks for. Lucy, are you there with me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
All right, all right. So before we call it a day, before we call it a close, just a tips out there that are looking at us doing this, what would be your advice to them concerning their plans towards furthering their education despite this pandemic and this COVID-19? What would be your advice? How do you tend to advise them concerning their preparation? You know, a lot of them are making preparations by they're having a sort of government policies and other unforeseen indices unknown to them. Okay. So what would be your advice to that? Thank you.
Sorry, can you repeat? I didn't hear you. So what would be my advice for students looking for education?
I said, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah, what would be your advice to students or young one out there, especially international students who are making move to come to UK or United States of America for their education? What would be your advice? You know, the pandemic has brought about a close or a pause to all these things. So, despite the pandemic, what would be your advice to them, those who are making advances towards these international schools? So that's that.
Sorry, can you hear me? I can't hear anything from you.
Can you hear me?
Okay, I can
Hello?
hear the written question now. So
Can you
what
hear
would
me
be
now?
my advice to international students that are looking to study during these pandemics? I would say that I think, as I said before, I think one of the most important things is that we realize that this will be for a while a new normal. So we cannot just stop with all the study abroad and all the education, but we have to learn how to study abroad and how to study and how to work during this time, and with all the measures that are being taken. So I think I would say that mobility and education abroad is still as important as it was before the pandemics. But I would say that also if it is online education in a new country or anything, it is still better because it gives you this experience that will later on help you definitely in your life. And I think one of my biggest advice would be to learn as you did before, the pandemics, but also be really careful in a sense that we also have to nourish these personal relationships that we had even before the pandemics, so we can all kind of make it through in the best way possible, I guess.
so much for those also, yeah, who are making their move to come for their internet for their studies to keep doing that and also to understand the trend of mobility, which is very very important. The time that you spend with us now. Thanks so much. Do you have any other thing you want to say that you think is beneficial to youth out there?
Hopefully I answered all of your questions. But if there be anything else, um, we can also tackle it in the next points or in the next panel discussions, I think. But I would just say maybe a
All right.
final thought. I think for B2 also learning is in this time of coronavirus and of pandemics. I think that there are a lot of things that we have to take care about and that we have to know about, and a lot of things have changed. But I would just say that in a word of encouragement, say that this shouldn't bring us down, that we should continue studying, continue working, and also continue nourishing our relationships during this time, and really hope, fingers crossed, that in the as soon as possible we'll be able to go back to normal. But I would say that education is such an important part of our lives that, and it was heard the most, I think, from my personal perspective, the most during this time of pandemics. But I say that education is something nobody can take away from us. So even if everything is falling apart, we should focus on education and we should make the best out of it as possible.
All right. Thanks so much for those tips. We really appreciate. Thanks for your time. We really appreciate the time you spent with us. Thanks so much, Lucy. Thanks so much. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you.
Have a nice day ahead.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
waiting to abuse them. Are we live?
Yeah, you can continue now. You can continue. Yeah, we are.
Fabulous. So I mean, that's basically how trafficking works. You coerce someone into modern slavery effectively through the promise of something which is not true. That promise often being a promise of a better life, of food on the table. And the interesting thing that I've found is that when I've had conversations with people is that the trafficker's goal is not to traffic people. Their goal is to make money. They don't care about the people they traffic, what their standard of living is. They don't care whether they eat, whether they can wash, whether they can clothe themselves. They just care about the money. The quality of life of the people being trafficked is irrelevant.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much for those wonderful tips. Wonderful contribution. However, another question for you is that do you think international students fall victim of this trafficking? Like you said, the essence of trafficking is for money, where the human there is not put into consideration. Do you think international students fall victim of this?
So this is a very interesting question. So attached to the briefing notes that I was sent for the session, there was the screenshot of an email of a student who moved to the northeast of England and who was forced to work without wages, essentially. They describe in the email that they got a part-time job at a takeaway pizza place, and when they found out that the employers were also traders of drugs, they were forced to work longer hours without break and pay. This is what they said in the email, and led to physical violence and more emotional abuse. And I found this a really interesting email because this story, to me, sounds like manipulation, coercion, abuse, and bullying at the workplace. It's terrible abuse. And whilst this bears a lot of resemblance to modern slavery, I don't think it is directly human trafficking. Is this trafficking? No. Is it exploitation? Yes. Does it leave this young person vulnerable? Yes. So I think we need to be very clear about what distinguishes modern slavery and human trafficking, although I do recognise that those two are inherently linked. In this case, in the case that I've just given you, is an international student, I think is very insignificant because it could have happened to anyone who went into a job. These are highly illegal and criminal work practices, and it's up to law enforcement to step in and intervene. So no, so what was the question again?
Yeah, I said the question is: do you think international students fall victim of human trafficking? Because this has become an issue of major concern for prospective international students who are rooting out for UK or United States of America. So what would you like to say? Do you think they fall victim, or per adventure they are just they're having a good time there? Maybe probably it's a wrong humor or wrong say that does not have to do with that.
So I've just given you a case of this international student, which I don't believe was human trafficking, but definitely bears some resemblance to and had the symptoms of modern slavery. It wouldn't make sense to force someone to apply for a visa, make them travel to a different country, and force them into higher education only to exploit them when they arrive. So I'm not entirely sure that international students are at a higher risk of human trafficking.
Dominic.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I can now.
Hi. I said another question I have for you is concerning slavery. Hello, are you with me?
I can't hear you at the moment.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Can you hear me? All right. I said the question is focused on slavery. Slavery. We all know that slavery have been abolished in paper and in terms of policy. But however, don't you think slavery is still in persistence in our world today? What do I mean by that? If not slavery, why should a student, an international student, should be running a long hour job with a little pay? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely, and I totally agree with you on that. That does.
All right.
Those are symptoms of modern slavery, but whether that's linked to human trafficking, that's a wider question.
Hello, are you there?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me now? I said what do we have to say about modern slavery? Modern slavery, where international students have to spend long hours working for a little pay. Don't you think that is slavery in this our contemporary time?
Yes. Very simple answer is yes.
Okay. What do you think could be the solutions to that? What do you think could be the solutions to that? What do you think international students can do concerning that? Because it's becoming an issue of concern today.
Yeah. So I definitely think there needs to be more education on how to deal with a situation when you find yourself in exploitative situations. You need to be educated. You need to know where to go for help. And it's the same about international students. There needs to be education on employment laws when they come, for example, when they come to the UK and they start working. We need to be very, very careful, and we need to make sure that they are aware that of the employment laws.
Nick, are you there?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Dominic? All right. The last question, which I would like you to know, is that there's an article that I read recently. It was talking about how some people use the visa, the US visa, or the visa system as a means of trafficking people. What do you have to say about that? Do you think it's obvious, or it's something that people are doing?
So is this specifically about the US visa?
Not only US visa, student visa as a means of trafficking people out for human trafficking.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think we can compare the US system to the system here in the UK, because start off with the fact that universities are obliged to confirm with the UK Visas and Immigration several times a year whether they are still in touch with the student. And there are problems within the UK system. They need to be investigated and fighting them. But it's also really important to acknowledge the fact that there are already extensive safeguards in place to prevent this kind of exploitation and these situations.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks so much for this contribution of yours. Also, I would like to ask some of the indices or some of the prominent indices that we find in our world today of how people exploit or rather traffic people is one of which is excessive work hours on the part of the immigrant, and also falsification of record, and also unauthorized deduction of from individuals' wages. How do you see that? Do you think it's something that policies need to tackle, or it's something that should be swept under the carpet? What's your view about that?
Could you repeat the question, please?
I said some of the indices that we have today is of human trafficking is falsification of records, underpayment of staffs, unauthorized deduction from wages. So what do you have to say about that? Do you think government policies are really working towards that, or it's something that have been swept under the carpet and hereby affecting international students or even immigrants? What do you have to say about that? Can you hear me now? Can you? Hello, Dominic, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. So obviously our laws here in the UK, work laws, are very highly regulated. So we need to make sure that international students are aware of these regulations.
Hello, are you there with me? Can you hear me? Hello, Dominic.
Michael, are you trying to speak?
Hey, Dominic, if you just keep going, you're doing a great job. If you just keep talking.
I was just wondering if was Michael asking a question?
No, I don't think so. I think the last thing he was asking you, if you started responding about the UK work policies being highly regulated and the international students needing to be aware. So if you keep expanding on that, that's a great point.
Okay, so I mean, obviously, we here in the UK, we have obviously here in the UK, we have the minimum wage. So all of our employment laws are very, very highly regulated. So, I mean, obviously, if there is a case of exploitation and abuse in the workplace, they need to seek advice from their universities and from the student support facilities within their universities. So that support is available, and if necessary, law enforcement can then obviously step in if there are illegal and criminal acts taking place in places of work.
Hi, Dominic. I'm just going to step in one more time. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay, brilliant. What about a situation if a student is working cash in hand? Now, cash in hand is not necessarily a bad thing if they're somebody has to pay, pay PAYE or whatever. But what if a student is working cash in hand? There's no contract, and then there's no protection, and then maybe their employer is asking them to work more hours for their visa and that sort of thing. Do you think there could be issues of exploitation arising in a situation like that, especially for international students?
Absolutely. The message there is very, very clear, and it's very, very short and simple. Don't do it because it probably is illegal. And those are really big warning signs that something else is going on. So absolutely right, advise against that. If there is a cash in hand job and they're not clear about the hours, don't do it. It's probably
Thanks for that, Dominic. That's fantastic. Michael, sorry, I'm jumping in because you're doing a great job. It's just the connection has a slight lag. And I know that you're asking some great questions. I know that there's a question that's worrying you, especially about students from Nigeria. And because Dominic knows a lot about human trafficking and modern slavery, I know you want to hear his response. Dominic, in chat, there is a news article. I dropped it in there that Michael read that he was a bit worried about. It was from Pi News, and it's talking about a Times investigation which said that gangs were using Tier 4 visas to traffic Vietnamese girls into the UK via independent schools. So the stuff is there in chat. Not putting you on the spot or anything because this might be news to you.
Yes.
But if there were instances where gangs were using Tier 4 visas to traffic Vietnamese or Nigerian students, would that worry you? And would you like to find out more? And what kind of questions immediately come to your mind?
Yes, absolutely. I definitely need to find out more about that because, I mean, that is a very clear abuse of human rights. And it's very, very important that at an international level, we find a solution where countries can work across borders and educate beyond borders to make sure that we get a grip on this issue. However, what I will say is that I've spoken to Catherine Bearder, who's a former MEP for the South East, who's done a lot of work on human trafficking in her time in the European Parliament. I've spoken to Steve Chalk, a former special advisor to the United Nations on human trafficking and the founder of a large charity dealing with human trafficking and working with crime prevention agencies in various countries across the world. And neither of them had any knowledge of human trafficking in education being a specific issue. So this is definitely something that we need to find out more about and get a grip on if that is really a big issue.
That's fair. I mean, Pi News, if you look in the chat later, you can have a look at that. It's a foreign Indian newspaper, but there was a very small report in the Times about it. And I think the key there is the word independent schools. It might be remember the term bogus colleges. There were people setting up these private colleges that maybe weren't that well regulated. And I think your original point of where there isn't regulation is where maybe possibly abuses might be springing up. Possibly. But would you agree that it most probably would merit a closer look?
So, can you say that again?
I said what I was saying is I think the key thing in this instance is the word independent. Mm-hmm. The route being used were private satellite schools, which I think might be slipping below the radar, for want of a better word. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So these kind of independent schools and language schools as well, possibly, are definitely a lot more open to abuse. But if they are found out they will lose the ability to obtain a Tier 4 visa. So, absolutely, the point you raise is incredibly important, and I think we do need to be looking into that more in the future, possibly in the nearer future rather than later down the line.
That would be wonderful. I really appreciate that, and hopefully following up from today's chat, and you have a read of that article, you might have other questions. You're the expert. You know what are the key factors and indicators of human trafficking and modern slavery. For the benefit of people listening to us today, it'd be great for you to repeat those. But if there had been an article in the Times, even if just a small one, it could be possibly that the issue is underreported. It could be possibly that people are scared, that they read a brochure, and they thought that what they were paying money towards was legitimate, and then they reach the UK and they may be afraid to come forward because then they think that they will get in trouble.
Well, and that's another thing that we need to make sure that we have good support networks in place for people who have been trafficked, so that they can get out of it. And there are organisations like Stop the Traffic who work with Interpol, the International Criminal Police Organisation, the National Crime Agency, CIA and FBI, who are doing a lot of work to combat human trafficking and modern slavery. So if in doubt, it's always worth contacting organisations like Stop the Traffic, because they are really the experts on this.
Thank you very much for that, Dominic. That's fantastic. Do you mind me just asking another question? Is that all right?
Yeah, go for it.
Thank you so much. So first of all, for the benefit of people listening to us online, would you go back over what are the key factors in your mind that indicate, 1, human trafficking, and then separately 2, modern slavery?
Okay, so obviously human trafficking essentially is the act of removing someone's freedom and using them as a commodity, basically as a cash cow, as I like to say. So it will be poverty, a sense of loneliness, lack of support, lack of friendships. These are all ingredients that create the fertile soil in which people are trafficked. So wherever there is a financial need, there is someone waiting to abuse, because that's how trafficking basically works. The reason a trafficker traffics people is because selling drugs and selling weapons is a one-time trade. You can only fire a bullet once. Once you've fired it, it's gone. You can only take a drug once. However, if you traffic a person, the buyer can use the people as a resource ongoingly for years. You can basically make money out of a person every single night until they drop dead. People as a commodity for the criminal mind are highly profitable. So the idea that there are rules on how people are trafficked is wrong. So basically, if my goal is to make weapons out of people, I will be inventing new ways of doing so and becoming more sophisticated. My techniques will evolve on a week-to-week basis, and my practice will change. Because if the law enforcement agencies catch up and catch on to me, then I'll switch to another technique. Trafficking takes hundreds of different forms, but what is always involved in every single case is the promise for a better life, and it always leads to modern slavery, to domestic service, sexual abuse, etc. So the ingredients in the story that we heard about, the young person who worked in the pizza place who was exploited and abused, these are all ingredients that make a person susceptible to being trafficked. And that's why it's really, really important that if you notice something that doesn't seem right, that you report it, look out for the warning signs, and keep an open eye, because human trafficking happens where you live. And, you know, don't want people to think it's somehow far removed from where they live. There was recently a case in Oxford where there were, 6 Polish girls working in a pub who were malnourished, and they had been victims of human trafficking. So it does happen wherever you look, and it's not just here in London or the big cities, unfortunately.
All right.
Thank you, Dominic. That is really important. I'm just going to ask Michael a question now. Michael, would you say students in Nigeria? Would you say students in Nigeria are promised a better life if they come to study in the UK or the US? Would you say that that's a message that students in Nigeria get? Or do you believe that by traveling abroad to study, you'll get a better life?
What said earlier on,
Sorry, Michael, speaking to the microphone. Sorry, speak.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now?
Yes, Michael. Yeah, as long as you speak close to the microphone like that, that'd be brilliant. Thanks.
All right, no problem. I said with what I've been said earlier on, it's obvious that when students from Nigeria go there, they are very able to a better life. However, like I've always said, that information is very, very vital. Just like Dominic have rightly said that there are institutions, FBI and other powerful institutions, whereby if they find it difficult or if they find themselves in being trafficked, they can reach out to these institutions and they will be saved. So concerning a better life, yeah, I believe with a conducive environment, and also Nigerians, international students from Nigeria being harnessing their skills, then they should be able to susceptible do very well in international countries.
Thank you for that. That's helpful. So bearing in mind the points that Dominic has said, right? So students from Nigeria, international students, they're traveling abroad to study because they want a better life, and they've had the news from somewhere. Someone has told them that to travel to the UK or to the US to study will give them a better life, right? Is that about right? Would you say it, Michael?
Not totally right. That's what I'm saying, because for instance, most of the students who want to go there, they have a purpose of going. So you can't come to a conclusion that or someone can just come to a conclusion that they are going there for a better life, like for that maybe that's their utmost purpose. But every one of them have their different purpose. Some, the essence of going is to further their education so as to increase terminally, and some increase salary wise. However, to my own understanding, from the general view, I believe that one of the vital reasons why students from Nigeria go out there to study is to get the best for their career and also utilize the best wherever they find themselves. So better life then comes in when they fulfill these things. Do you get? So that's my point.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, I wasn't trying to suggest that people were trying to use education to live elsewhere. It's the fact that you think, let me travel to study and I get this good education and it will open up opportunities for me, which would lead to a better life. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's better that way.
Thank you. And then, okay, so we know that people want to use education to get a better life, however they want that. wherever they want that. They might go and study overseas and then come back home to Nigeria. But the tuition fees are very high, right?
Of course.
Would you like to explain to Dominic what high tuition fees are like for international students? I mean, Dominic might know already, but it's good to hear direct from the person who's going through these kinds of things. And thank you for your patience, Dominic.
All right. Like I want to say, the tuition fees for students.
Need you to speak closer to your mic.
Yeah, the tuition fees are very, very high, and to an extent, the scholarship available is also very, very low. To an extent, some partial scholarship, some 20%, 50%, some fully. Are you getting me? So the tuition fee is one of the hindrance to students from Nigeria who want to come there to do their study. However, many opportunities are coming out, which include scholarship offer, and one of which is MasterCard, Chevening, and a couple of others. Like I've always said that adequate information will make most of the international students here in Nigeria scale through. Once they have access to the right information, like I've always been anchoring that they should be strategically located where informations are. So I think there are scholarship offers. So I wouldn't know if Dominic can hint me or hint you out there watching this some of the other scholarship offer that they might benefit from aside the ones that I've listed above, because one of the hindrance is the tuition fee. I get him is quite huge for most of the students here. So are there other source that you think international students or Nigerians who want to come down there to further their interest can make adequate use of? Thank you very much.
Hi, Dominic.
Hello, Dom.
Hi, oh, you're muted for some reason. We need to unmute you.
Am I? Yeah, I'm unmuted now. So tuition fees, obviously, they are advertised up front. They're on the university's website, so it's really important that one budget properly before going into it. And scholarships equally are also published on university websites, and they're often very specific as well. So just need to make sure that one knows exactly what one is applying for before doing it, and making sure that that it's financially feasible.
Thank you, Dominic. If we said to you that there are instances where students have been given unconditional offers by universities, but they do not have the money at all to pay the tuition fees, would that worry you if you heard that there were British universities doing that? Hello, can you hear me? Okay. Do you need me to repeat the question, Michael?
Yeah, I'm here with you. I'm still here with you.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, Dominic. Do you need me to repeat my question, Dominic? Sorry,
Yes, if you could just repeat that, please.
Okay. I was saying, if we said to you that there are instances where there are students in Nigeria or other countries outside of the US and the UK, and they were they'd been given unconditional offer letters to study at university, and they didn't have the money to pay the tuition fees, but they had the letter from the university that said that they had a guaranteed place, and they were being urged or demanded to pay the money immediately. would that concern you? It might not be trafficking or modern slavery or anything, but would it concern you that someone that clearly didn't have the finances but wanted to learn to get a better life was being offered something that would push them into significant debt that they didn't have the means to pay it, but they wanted it anyway? Would that situation concern you?
So, I mean, it's quite normal to pay a deposit before you start. But the offer from the university is one based on your academic qualifications, not on your financial status. So it's up to the student to work out if they can afford it. So, I'll repeat the point. The offer from the university is an academic one, not one based on the student's financial situation.
That's fine. But what if the large majority of people that they're offering this opportunity to, because of how expensive it is, they can't afford it? They honestly cannot afford it.
Well, unfortunately, that I don't see that the university should be made responsible for that, because, again, the offer is made based on what your academic qualifications are, and if the budgeting, if the financing doesn't work out, then the easiest way would be to not accept the offer and look for a different university.
I mean, that would be sensible. We're not placing blame anywhere, Dominic, today. We're just going through lived experiences and just trying to see things from different perspectives. If I love Hermes, I love Chanel, I love their bags. I have a Chanel bag fund where I'm saving up to buy a Chanel bag before I die. And we if you can't afford it, don't buy it. It seems sensible, doesn't it? But I'm not sure if that always works out in terms of education. And Michael's already talked about the fees are very, very high, and little scholarships. And I'm not sure if desperation is the right word, but people want to better themselves. And so maybe Michael could talk a little bit more about that. If you're with us, Michael, the fact that there is little financial support, the fees are that high, you have an offer, you might have the brains, but you just don't have the money, but you don't want to decline the offer either. Would you like to talk about that just a little bit, Michael, if you're there?
Yeah, please, can you repeat that? I can't hear you very well.
Sure.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. You spoke, Michael, about the tuition fees being very, very high and wanting scholarships, saying that scholarship opportunities were very, very low. And the fact that you're wanting scholarship is that it's really difficult to, you really can't afford to study. You might have the letter, you might have the brains, but you just don't have the money. But in that situation where you have the letter but you don't have the money, do people just give up and say, well, I don't have the money, or do they, or does it push them into situations? Well, I mean, what is the experience there? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah. The experience here has been so devastating to an extent, in the sense that like I've always told students here, that getting admission is not the problem. In fact, as far as you can provide all the necessary documents, admission will be granted. But the fee is one of the things that is limiting students from here. So one of the things students do is that once they are given admission and the fee is a conflicting factor, so most times many defer their admission. Okay? And those who can't defer their admission, who probably were given a 50% discount, often resolve into fundraising. Now, fundraising is done whereby students seek funds from people who help them to buttress to finish their payment, their tuition fee payment. Okay, and this is becoming an attitude now that I would come and do funding for you is not really a good thing to an extent, because not everybody, in fact, if it become a culture now, people might not even attend to you when it's even more demanding. So that's why I'm asking that what other thing do you think international students who find themselves in this situation could do so as not to defer the admission? Because most of the time I've seen couple of friends, couple of students who end up deferring the admission because of the tuition fee. So that's my question.
Do you need the question repeated, Dominic?
That would be great.
So Michael is asking, what support could there be for students so that they wouldn't have to defer the offer letters that they've received from universities? And the reason why Michael is asking that is because generally when the students in Nigeria or an international student from a poor country, they've got the brains, but they just do not have the money. And that's not the fault of anyone per se. I guess it's not the fault of any university that they're offering something that somebody just cannot afford. But what Michael is then saying is that it's creating a culture. He's noticed a culture in Nigeria where you've got what is an opportunity, but then it's pushing people into going to great lengths to fundraise and finance this opportunity because they can't afford it. And there are even instances where there's a culture growing up where people might want to exploit that there are people fundraising this opportunity. Michael is wondering if more scholarships might help, but he's asking you, what do you think? What can be done that can take the pressure out of this kind of cycle that's starting, where people might be pushed to great length for something that they can't afford, but they don't want to give up either.
So, I mean, this seems to me like a bit of a social mobility issue. So, if the governments of those countries want to sponsor scholarships abroad for students or university courses, then I think they should be able to do that. But at the moment, I'm unsure as to what exactly we'd be trying to achieve here by
Sorry, I was just waiting for you to finish, Dominic. So that's a great point. Thank you very much. Does it worry you that there might be a situation where people from other countries are putting themselves maybe at risk trying to fundraise to study?
So, I mean, obviously that will be a problem, but as I say, they receive their offers based on their academic qualifications, and if if the funds, if the budgeting doesn't work out, then from a university perspective, there's not a great deal that can or could or should be done about it.
So what if the majority of people in the university can't afford it?
If they can't afford it.
So what you have is an industry that's set up on people paying money that's pushing them into debt, and that they truly can't afford, and it's pushing them into hardships and high risk situations. So it's no one's fault, but the fact of it is, and it's not maybe one student or two students, but it's the large majority. So you've got an industry that's based on the significant majority of the people cannot afford it year on year.
Yeah, I mean, so obviously the very easy solution would be just to not take up the offer. Most universities in the UK are non-profit. So unfortunately, there's, the easiest solution would be, unfortunately, to have to decline the offer. Dropped?
All
Michael?
right. Dominic,
Sorry.
are you there?
Yeah, I think I just heard rocks as well.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry, there's a slight delay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I think that's really important. So what you're highlighting, Dominic, is that there really is a personal responsibility here. I'm not sure if Michael is with us, but if
I can hear a noise in the background.
So what do you have?
I'm here with you. I'm following you guys.
So where the response is, it's your responsibility to know whether you can afford this or not. And if you come over and you get into trouble because you can't afford it, then this is something that's your responsibility. What would you say to that?
Oh, all right. I understand that is a stable price for anyone, irrespective of your background or your environment. But however, that's why I'm asking that, are there other source of funding or available opportunities that international students from any place in the world can make use of? If when they get admission, okay, probably you need to come in, then maybe make a partial payment. Then when you come in, you can start working and be schooling at the same time, or other scholarship for international students. That's what I'm asking about. That's what I'm asking Dominic about.
Just before you jump in, Dominic, because Michael is being very polite and diplomatic. If it is an industry is going into a country where it can be demonstrated where they're selling, it's unaffordable and it's putting people in risk, why is that industry targeting that market? Does the industry not have a responsibility to know the people can't afford it?
Well, I believe, this is it's a social mobility issue. It's an issue of budgeting properly, and if the governments of those countries want to sponsor scholarships or university courses and degrees in other countries, then that's that they could run that as program, but it's not the university's or the institution's responsibility to know what someone can or can't afford.
What do you say to that then, Michael? What do you think about that?
I I didn't hear him very well. Very well. Please can
Sorry, we can't hear you, Michael. I was saying, what do you think about Dominic's point that it's not the industry's issue to know whether the people that they're selling stuff to can afford it or not?
Yeah, okay. Well, he has a point. What I'm saying is, I know it's not the industry to decide that, but are there other? I'm asking. Is a question now. Like, I know a couple of other fellowship scholarship available for international students. I'm asking, being someone who stayed there, okay, who school there. Are there other opportunity international student can adopt so as to make this target of tuition fee without necessarily declining the admission? That's what I'm asking.
No, this isn't being streamed yet. Are you ready to go live? I'm gonna hit the button. I'm gonna hit the button. Your session is meant to start at 2 o'clock. Thank you, all three of you, for your time to be here. I really appreciate it. And let's have a wonderful conversation. Adi is fantastic. He's got some brilliant points to make. Some of the stuff that might be discussed today might be news for you, Chris. That's fine. It's just a great discussion that we'll enjoy. And thanks, Jennifer, for helping out. And thank you, Adi. Starting live stream now.
Who's Nadia?
Okay, can we go off now? Hello, Rox.
Yes, Dominic and Michael, thank you very much. That was a challenging conversation discussion for sure. Dominic, I hope that we become the best of friends. I don't agree with you. I think that there is something about responsible, ethical capitalism. We're looking after baboons and palm oil and rainforests, and I think human beings, if they're being forced into extreme situations, even if this is something that's new to you, or it's a different perspective, I hope that because you love people no matter where they come from. If you know that your fellow human being are facing such extreme difficulties just to learn, that you might want industry to be a bit more sympathetic and maybe look for ways to support people, which I think is what Michael was asking you. But it's been a great discussion today. And hopefully, this is a conversation that you would be willing to continue with us. We might be presenting to you a different perspective that you've not heard of before. There's some stuff in your chat. We'll send you the Fly News thing as well. But we'd be so grateful for your patience. There's something about talking to people, just their lived experiences may be different to what you're going through, or maybe what your experience is. And we might be seeing the world different to how you see the world. But if we can share our experience with you, maybe, there's a way, a compromise, a way forward that can work for industry and students, hopefully.
Absolutely.
Is that fair?
I could not agree with you more.
Awesome. Well, I really look forward to continuing these conversations with you. Hopefully in the very near future, as you say. That's exciting. Thank you for your time. All right, then. Have a great day. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye for now.
Medical Association for Students. My name is Jennifer and I'm the Head of Peace Projects at Educating Beyond Borders. So before we start, would you both like to introduce yourselves?
Chris, if you want to go first.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Chris Smith. I am one of the co-chairs of the BMA's Medical Students Committee. I'm a final year medical student at Southampton and I'm currently placed in Jersey for placement. Good to be here.
Hi there, my name's Addy. I'm a biomedical student at Imperial. I'm from London and I've taken a summer internship program with EB to specifically focus on accessibility to higher education within medicine.
Okay, thank you very much. It's good to be here with you. So today we'll be talking about public health in education. So that's primarily mental health, homelessness, poverty, immigration and healthcare. So first of all, we'll speak to Addy. So Addy, from your experience of being a student during the coronavirus pandemic, what would you say have been some of the main challenges around public health that you've noticed?
So I think this has been an issue before coronavirus also, and it's been a steadily emerging issue. But I think it is mental health, because I think students, they don't understand mental health as much as they would like to. And they just feel like they're not confident enough to actually approach someone regarding their mental well-being and mental welfare. And whilst I completely empathize with the fact that it's very difficult to talk about it in many cases, and each individual situation is completely different from one another, I think there needs to be more done regarding resources to help students cope with mental health, not only during this pandemic, but also beyond the pandemic and actually throughout their university degrees. It's quite difficult to say one thing about mental health, but the one thing you can actually say about it is that people will face it in so many different ways. Whether or not someone just feels really down for a week, that might not be clinical depression, but the fact is that is a mental health issue, and someone might need short-term help for that, and they should be catered for that as well. And I feel like universities are not doing enough, and particularly I feel like the government is not doing enough to help these students.
Definitely, I see exactly what you're saying. I've been doing quite a lot of research into this for various articles I've written for Educating Beyond Borders, and obviously in preparation of this. And the average waiting time for getting counselling in British universities is 43 days, which is longer than the average term. Imagine having to wait all that time while you're feeling so anxious.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think for Chris to interject here would be quite good, but just before that, there is a kind of, as Chris will probably elaborate further on, I am aware that there is a shortage of mental health doctors within the NHS. Is that something, Chris, you could talk about maybe a little bit more?
Yeah, so sure thing. I think a lot of what you said about mental health for students is extremely pertinent. The BMA's been doing a lot of work and a lot of research around medical student mental health in particular. Our most recent survey coming from Wales, and we found that up to 20% of medical students at one time consider themselves to be in poor mental health, and that over the course of a medical degree, about 70% of people will experience a significant period of ill mental health. So you are right, it is a big problem amongst students. With regards to the workforce, yeah, you're right, whether that be in occupational health for doctors, for nurses, for NHS workers, or whether that be people going into psychiatry, to serve the general public. You're right, there's a shortage, and efforts to try and to bolster that, like the new foundation program that they've brought in for psychiatry training, they've been successful, but they're going to take a bit of time to implement and to really yield results. So you're right, the government could be doing more to support us.
I mean, just following on from what you were saying, Chris, about medicine, I know for a fact a lot of my friends are medics, and they say the demands of the course are so severe at times that it just plays a significant part in deteriorating their mental state of mind, and it doesn't put them in the right frame, right mindset in terms of where they are, the upcoming generations of medical students coming through, but they're not getting the support that they need as part of their degree. And however, I do want to extend the discussion beyond just medicine, because there's loads of different courses out there. We know, I mean, I think it's pretty well established that medicine is psychologically quite a taxing degree to do. But there are many courses which are highly competitive and not necessarily highly competitive. Students have lots of different things that play a factor or factor into, should I say, their mental well-being. Would either of you two like to pick up on a few factors maybe that you could suggest to the audience?
Okay, well,
yeah, please go ahead.
Well, mental health in university, as I said, is a very large issue, and it will definitely be made worse by the coronavirus pandemic, as both existing students and new students start new terms at university. But in that mental health, the causes for mental health issues are numerous.
Yeah.
Down to this, starting the course, there's this expectation that university years are supposed to be the best years of your life.
Yeah.
And if they're not, if you don't get on with your housemates, if you struggle with your course, if even if you're struggling and being home for the first time, which for many will be the case, it is hard to accept that you're not necessarily having the best times of your life.
It is important to have that kind of reflection. I think one factor which I feel is certainly an emerging issue, especially within London universities, is the kind of feeling that they're not got the financial capacity to live their life as they can, especially within London, because the rent of finding accommodation, actually the process of getting accommodation beyond your first year is actually quite difficult. And that is quite a strenuous period of time in itself, as many of my friends are working out. But the fact is, when you live in London, you want to be close to your university. And for Imperial, that's South Kensington. Now, if you're unaware, South Kensington is actually quite an affluent area, and it is very, very expensive to live in Chelsea and Kensington. So to find housing within close proximity of my university has been a real challenge, because the people you live with, you need to accommodate for the fact that they have a budget in terms of how much rent they're willing to put a week. And it is a really, really stressful process, which definitely plays a part into students' mental well-being and welfare. And I'm pretty sure that is the same around the country, but I know for a fact that in London, it is a really, really serious issue that's faced to students.
Definitely.
If Chris could just give me some of his kind of experiences of housing whilst doing your medical degree, that would be brilliant.
So yeah, finance is something that plays on the mind of every student at every university across at least England. I'm in an unusual position. I'm a graduate entry medical student, so I've been at university for a long time. And throughout that time, I've lived in some great houses, some expensive houses, some terrible houses, some cheap houses. And the finances and your living situation determines your health in so many ways, whether that be your mental health. or even your physical health.
Yeah.
We found that due to financial concerns, about 70% of medical students have gone without essentials like food, heating, new clothing.
Yes, of
Because
course.
the financial situation is so dire. With the student finance system the way that it is, the grants, if they're there, aren't good enough. The maintenance isn't good enough. Specifically for medical students, if you're in receipt of the NHS bursary, it might sound like a nice thing, getting a bursary, but you end up losing quite significant amounts of money. And just, COVID's just come in and it's just exacerbated everything that was already there. Whereas maybe you'd be able to study during term time and work during the holidays or at the weekends, COVID has decimated the economy and therefore part-time work opportunities.
Yeah.
So normal student finance going forwards, it's got huge relevance to.
Yeah. So, just to pick up on your point, I know students who were doing part-time jobs to help with their finances throughout their degrees, and also to give them that kind of little bit of pocket money, as I say, to kind of go out and enjoy themselves whilst they're at university. But the student loan system, and especially the maintenance loan, in many cases isn't enough to allow students to live those kind of the best life that they can whilst they're at university. And as Jennifer has actually said, that university is meant to be the best times of your life, and the way that our current system is set up, it doesn't actually allow for that to happen.
No, you're right. And I think with a lot of the maintenance, it's still dependent on household income.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people, there's a parental expectation that you're going to be getting money from your parents. And for those people, I mean, first off, the awkward conversations and the discussions you've got to have with your family. The second off, a lot, realistically, people don't get that. So there's a big class divide. There's a big socio-economic divide about people that can really have that best experience and people that have to work hard just to keep their head above water, so they can graduate.
So I just wanted to, sorry, Jennifer, if you'd like to interject.
So yeah, I completely agree, and it's not just for medical students as well. When I was doing my undergraduate degree, I did a history degree.
Sure.
And I remember there was one term in my first year where my student housing costs, took out all of my maintenance loan, and I was very lucky to be able to ask help my parents, but a lot of people, as you say, aren't in that situation. And so in that situation, wouldn't have had any money, and now with the coronavirus pandemic, aren't going to be able to find part-time jobs to be able to make ends meet.
Yeah.
In the same way. But housing costs are ridiculous. In 2018, they averaged out about 73% of your student loan, which is ridiculous. And
it's unsustainable, isn't it? God.
It is. And that's been going up every year. Back in 2011, it was only 58%.
Yeah. I mean, we're all home students, but if we just take a moment to think about international students, the situation is so much worse for them, in that they are paying probably triple the amount that we're paying for our university degree, and they don't get a maintenance loan, as far as I know. And so I do feel that international students, many of who end up actually coming to London universities, are at a severe disadvantage in terms of the financial implications and the burden of money for them at university.
They are, and not only that, they don't have that support network to fall back on. But many of the home students would. So because of the pandemic, the hospital accommodation that I was staying in was reclaimed, and it was used to house doctors who were working on COVID frontline. So I had to leave, and I was lucky enough to be able to move back in with my parents, who were relatively local. But for international students, you just don't have that problem. And with COVID, you were seeing people not able to return, or being afraid to return to their country of origin because they might not have been let back in again. And that's when they've had to find places, they've had to pay for places. on some of the visas, it stipulates you can't work more than a certain number of hours. So again, financially, it's been hitting them. So you're absolutely right to say that international students and international workers across health have been really particularly affected by this.
So, yeah.
Definitely.
I think it's pretty important that we've touched on mental health, because this is a very complex issue, as we all know, but it ties into so many different things within accessibility to education, and not only within accessibility, but when you're actually at university, mental health plays a role in so many different things that we probably won't have time to speak about all of them, of course not. But COVID-19, as we've made abundantly clear throughout this discussion, has been a driving force for deteriorating and debilitating mental health for students.
Yeah, absolutely. I wrote a short piece in the BMJ recently in response to some research that they've done, speaking about our particular mental health issues as students. I mean, one of the things that we're particularly rely on are university sports societies, clubs, things like that. And when the university shut down overnight, so did all of our support systems. That hit some people really, really hard. Not to mention all of the health benefits that you lose from that extra exercise.
Of course.
Yeah.
I mean, as a university student myself, I know how important it was that I joined the football team as part of not only my university experience, but that kind of support network that's there and the pastoral care that the society provides for me. And I just feel like COVID-19, we're now going back to university in October with no clear idea of exactly how our course is going to be run. I mean, all we've been told is that our course is going to be virtual for the first term. And that kind of element of uncertainty is universal across the country. And again, is another thing that's playing into the anxiety that is brought upon by COVID-19 for university students going into, well, for example, A-level results day was just yesterday, but students still don't know if they are going to be taught virtually, or if they're international, for example, whether or not they should come to the country and go into student accommodation. There's so many factors here that is so uncertain for them that they just don't know. And that fear of the unknown is something that they have to kind of deal with, but they should be able to deal with it with a support network. And that support network is certainly not there from the institutions in which they are enrolling onto.
No, not at all. Imagine being first year at university. Usually you've the freshers week or fortnight to help introduce you. International students often have a week of their own where they can meet other international students and get to know societies. But then imagine starting university for the first time after all the stress of the A-levels and BTECs this year, having not done the exams, and for 39% having their grades downgraded to start university and be potentially purely in that bubble of students that they're living with, and then not having all these introductory sessions that are offered through to freshers fortnights a week, and then having class online, which will make it harder to make friends with people on their course.
Of course. I mean, I could just tell you today, like I'm part of the kind of WhatsApp group chat for the incoming students on my course, and a lot of them are like, are any one of you going to stay in London this term or not? Or are you gonna, if you're on international, are you gonna stay at home? Or so many things that are playing on their minds, but they've just got their results and they're not even that excited about being at university. That's such a just to think about that. I remember when I got into university, I was ecstatic for the time, eagerly anticipating going to start my first year. And I just feel like they've lost that excitement because of COVID-19 and the uncertainty that it brings. And that's quite devastating to think about. And
you're right. The fear of the unknown it's just going to make so many people cautious and wary. And with everybody going back to their universities or going to universities for the first time, with COVID, that could pose its own problems as well. So you could be moving large groups of people from one part of the country to the other, potentially spreading a virus. You could be locking down different areas locally, meaning some people might be disrupted and therefore be at less of a good position than some of their peers in different parts of the country. But from a social point of view, you're absolutely right. I can remember very vividly finding out exactly when I got into medical school, and the excitement of that will stick with me. But when you've been the victim of such a scandal, really, with the A-level results, I mean, you can only just take the wind out of yourselves, can't you?
Yeah. Jennifer, if there's anything else you'd like to add, because there was actually something that I wanted to get onto regarding this, but on the other end of the spectrum, which was there now, because of COVID-19, we've got a whole cohort of students who've just graduated and have no jobs. And this again is to do with the uncertainty of not getting a job and sitting at home during a pandemic and following their degree, not knowing what they want to do with their life. And again, it ties into mental health, because the situation with the world is that businesses are closing, grad schemes are not open, there's no uptake of students through big corporations. A lot of students, certainly those who have just graduated, are finding they are having a torrid time in terms of trying to get a job. And that, I think it will be important for us to just touch on that issue as well.
Definitely is very difficult. It's because, as not only is there not so many jobs available, but for each job you go to, there's going to be that much more competition than there usually would be.
Exactly, yes.
And imagine if you don't know what to do, your options are suddenly disappearing before your eyes.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important that both students and recent graduates try and do as much as they can to not only keep the mind occupied, but also gain experience. For example, joining Educating Beyond Borders has been a great experience to gain different skills.
Yeah.
For example, for me, in report writing, article writing, research.
Yes, certainly. I mean, whilst I'm not graduated, I can certainly say that working with and being mentored by professionals within EB has been a really invaluable experience for me going forward in terms of policy making, really kind of strategizing and really assessing the logistics of potential policy towards issues within higher education has somewhat been a bit of an eye-opener for me. And yeah, that was kind of my motivation for enrolling onto EB's internship program. But yes, I mean, we're stuck now with graduates who have no clue what they're doing or what they want to do. Of course, we don't think it's their fault, but is there anything they could be doing during this time? If you could suggest a few things to make their time a bit more productive whilst the pandemic occurs?
Well, I've said I have very similar reasons for joining EB, and it's been a great opportunity, and I would recommend that any students who are interested in issues in higher education, whether they be public health, student trafficking, work experience, or any of the other issues we're talking about in this summit, consider joining. It's fantastic opportunity. But it's not the only one out there, of course. There's also been several virtual internships offered by organisations like the Bright Network,
Sure.
Leadership.
I actually did a Bright Network virtual internship for consultancy. So yeah, they've got plenty on offer, and just a little bit of research into what you could potentially do from your home. You might find, for any students listening, there are things that you could be doing, and there are opportunities out there. And furthermore, just really take this time to do something that you haven't done before, or you've never had the time to do before.
Hi guys.
Take up something.
I'm going to jump in. Forgive me. I want to hear more from Chris today.
Yeah, sure.
I'm only getting him for the next 30 minutes, thankfully.
Okay.
And we want to learn from Chris today, because we don't know when we'll get him back again.
I'll be delighted to come back, don't worry.
Oh, good. So, Adi, you're making great points. Jennifer as well. But Chris, you've had the paperwork from us. And just in general, all those points, do you see them as public health issues? And were you guys aware of them as public health issues? Or is it new information to you that you think is relevant or not? So more on the public health, because yes, public health is anything that affects you, your quality of life, and we've raised 3 out of the 9 so far. But I don't know all of the issues that we've identified as public health. Do you see them as public health, or what is your view, Chris? And we can always come back. We know Jennifer and Adi's view. We want to hear Chris's view, just for a little bit, please.
Yeah, no, of course. Looking at the things that you sent over, about, for example, homelessness. Absolutely, that's a public health crisis. I mean, I've been lucky enough to spend some time with the homelessness outreach team as part of my placement recently, and that, the public health involved with that, and the crisis that it is absolutely something that students and us as young people need to be aware of. At the BMA, we've got a lot of focus on public health, and the Medical Students Conference, I think it was last year or maybe a couple of years ago, proposed that as a healthcare profession, you just start looking at things like knife crime from a public health point of view, instead of a criminal point of view, drugs as a public health point of view, rather than a criminal point of view. So I think you're right, public health touches on so much, and often young people will experience it very differently. I'm lucky enough to have had no experience of knife crime, but I have had a lot of experience with, for example, air pollution, living in Southampton. Again, not just specific to young people or to students, but there's so much you can do around public health. The BMA, one of the things you mentioned about keeping young people out of higher education with period poverty. Now, of course, it's an awful thing that this exists. But it's something that the BMA has been leading on. We led the campaign after a medical student proposed that sanitary products were given to NHS inpatients free of charge, which is something the government eventually agreed to. And it's just things like that where students and young people can take a lead and make huge, tangible differences for millions of people in this country and across the world, because these aren't problems that are just faced by Britain. But if you've got any specific questions or points that you'd like my opinion on, I'll be delighted to expand.
Well, last year, due to blocks of student accommodation were left unfinished when students first moved to university, and that affected both home and international students who suddenly arrived at university expecting their accommodation to be all ready for them, but it wasn't even built. And they had to move into accommodation that both isolated them from their university campus and any of the people that they've been living with, whether that's their course mates or potential friends. And those people obviously felt very anxious and isolated living in this accommodation. Have you got any advice about how people who made homeless in that way, or through evictions by other landlords, unsuitable housing conditions in HMOs, or falls out of their friends, can look after their mental health?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fantastic question. With regards to evictions, I'm just going to do a quick BMA plug, because this is something that we've heard of, and if there are any medical students out there facing that, please get in contact with the BMA, because we're committed against that. But yeah, I mean, the best thing to do would be to find local support groups. I know it's a lot more difficult in COVID times, and if necessary, if it's really dire, speak to housing associations, speak to hostels, I guess, I imagine. Unfortunately, it's not something I have a ton of experience with, so I can't recommend comprehensive solutions. But a lot of the time, the university can step in and maybe provide you some hardship funding so you can rent somewhere for a short amount of time. Or there are charities and grants that you can apply to for short-term relief. But there are also people where, if you feel that you're living in substandard conditions with private landlords, you can contact, for example, renters' unions or local authorities to take action against the landlords, so that you're living within your rights. And yeah, I mean, it's a horrible thought to think that any students, particularly international students coming over here, would be homeless throughout any fault of their own. So there's definitely help out there.
Yeah, completely agree with you.
Thank you both. Yeah, so it's very important to look after your mental health at all times, but I say it can become very difficult if you're made homeless through no fault of your own, especially as an international student. So it's very important that you get the help that Chris provides and at BMA, and anything that's provided through university, local authorities, etc. But okay, so we'll move on to mental health services within universities.
Sure.
What sort of things have you been doing with the BMA around mental health provision for students?
Oh, again, we've been doing loads of work around this. A lot of it's to do with medical student mental health in particular. We face unique challenges. For example, we tend to be on placement 9 to 5 and very strictly monitored. So it's difficult for us to make standard university mental health appointments. And the services are more stretched than ever. And, we found that people have such low confidence in medical school and university mental health services that 23% of students in our last survey in Wales chose not to go to their universities because they had so little confidence in them. And even after some people had gone to seek help from the universities, the offers were so poor that 10% of those people actually said, you know what, I'd rather have nothing than what the university is offering. I'll go elsewhere and seek something else. So yeah, there are huge problems. It's just, it's chronically underfunded. It's understaffed. A lot of the people that are there are extremely well trained and extremely well meaning, but it's just such a high burden because of the way that the higher education sector is now, that the waiting lists can be months and months long. And when you finally get them, you only get a limited number of sessions. So things might not be resolved, and it might leave you in a precarious position, or it might leave you feeling worse than when you started. You think, oh God, they haven't been able to sort me out. What do I do now? There's a lot of problem with provision. So it needs to be better funded, more appointments, it needs to be more flexible and out of hours, and it needs to be sustainable. It can't just be short courses. People need to get what they need, because otherwise you've just got a recipe for disaster, leaving people on the edge.
Definitely. I say it's heartbreaking that there's students who won't even ask for support because they know it's so unfunded and it's so hard to access.
Yeah. And then you get the problems as well of if students leave for summer holidays, they might be going back to a toxic environment or something that might not suit their mental health. Or if they're on peripheral placements like medical students and nurses or in years in industry, you might not typically be able to access the mental health services at your local universities. So although they're theoretically there and the university can tick their box saying that they've provided it, it might be completely inaccessible to a large number of students.
Yeah, certainly.
Exactly. And are there any services you'd recommend if a student is struggling to get hold of mental health or wellbeing provision at their university?
I mean, from a medical student point of view, the BMA has 24/7 counselling, completely confidential. So I'd recommend phoning, emailing, just contacting the BMA. But otherwise, there are so many great organisations out there. You've got Mind, you've got the Samaritans. Speak to your GP and your doctor. Speak to a personal tutor, a close friend. The worst thing that you can do is bottle it up.
Yeah.
You've got Nightline at a lot of universities as well, which is a great organisation.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, for me, when I've been challenged with mental health concerns throughout my degree, I've gone to actually people within the older years who can provide an insight for me. Certainly a lot of my, as I said to you, I'm part of medics football within university. A lot of the people that I hang around with are medics. So for me, it's very easy to approach them and know I could get a good service out of them. And it could be really useful for me. So, I mean, of course, if the situation gets worse for you, I would certainly recommend the GP as the first point of entry. And many people actually don't realize that the GP is not just for prescribing antibiotics, or when you're ill, you go and you get your prescription. They actually do, they are trained and they can help to comfort you and really have a consultation with you regarding mental health, where they can then refer you further if necessary. But it's all about just like establishing that rapport with your GP. And I think people forget, like certainly within my age group, they don't realize the importance perhaps of having that relationship with your local GP. Because certainly when you get older and older, and where statistically perhaps the more health concerns are raised when you get older, it's good to have that established relationship with them. And yeah, it's something that I'd certainly recommend, is going to the GP.
Yeah, absolutely. And make sure you register when you're at university, so you're not just back home.
Yeah.
The GP, so. Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, as I said, if you do struggle with your GP, there are other options, as Chris mentioned, such as Nightline, BMA if you're medical students, Mind, Samaritans as well.
Can I just jump in? That was fantastic, guys. Chris, one key message to students about what is public health. What do you want students to know about public health and what is actually health?
Yeah,
that is a question. That is. Now I have to hold my hand up and say I'm no public health consultant. I'm not anywhere for Public Health England, but I would say that public health, obviously, it's big legislative initiatives that shape the health of the entire population, rather than just the smaller, more personalised health that you might individually go to your GP for. But that doesn't mean that you can't have some say in it, that you can't take control of your own health as part of public health. So I would say, don't just rely on these big initiatives, even though they are there. You've got to really take control of your own health. So with public health around COVID, make sure you wear masks, make sure you distance appropriately, make sure you quarantine and self-isolate if you need to. But then when it comes to other big schemes like these new cycleways, maybe take up cycling or get off the bus a bit and walk. So, public health, it touches so many parts of our lives. But don't just rely on the big changes and for the change to come from the top. As students, we can take the initiative ourselves, and engage with the issues, like homelessness, like drug misuse, and work ourselves to improve the situations around the issue.
I think it is really important for students or anyone, for example, to really actually understand and try and work out in a way for themselves what it is that's causing them to feel a certain way. Of course, that is why you go for a consultation to really get to the deep-rooted issues in certain mental health mental health illnesses. But I think just to really understand why you're feeling the way you're feeling, and that period of self-reflection is quite important. And I found that to be really kind of crucial for myself, especially when I've felt anxiety regarding coursework submissions or examinations, virtual examinations, for example, for the first time. Like, this was quite a strenuous time for me to be doing that at home whilst everyone's at home. My mum's a dentist. She was on the phone constantly, doing phone call consultations with patients, and everyone's really busy in the house. And there's so many different personal experiences that people need to really kind of pinpoint and analyze for themselves and say, well, how best can I actually approach this issue? And to really take that first step in realization through reflection is quite an important message to deliver to students.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely, I think it's good to realise that you're not the only one feeling that way as well. When you're feeling anxious, it can feel very isolating. You see everyone else having a good time at university, or what appears to be a good time, and you think, why is it just me who feels like that? But as we've been discussing, it's not at all. A lot of students suffer from mental health issues, and you're not the only one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. So we've got 15 more minutes. So for wrapping up, Jennifer, sorry, I get my tongue in here. Jennifer, if we end with you, because you have a holistic view of public health, but Adi, you've got specific concerns about medical courses, don't you?
Yeah, and this is something that I would love to kind of just bounce off with Chris about.
Absolutely.
So
this is your 5 minutes of fame.
Yes, sure. So at EB, I've been specifically recruited to kind of strategize and really analyze the whole medical application system and the potential flaws within them and how to actually combat those. So, Chris, as you said, you were a graduate entry medical student. So, is medicine what you always wanted to do, or did you do biomed with the view that after I finish this degree, I'll do medicine?
I have to be honest with you, don't I? It's being recorded. Medicine was always something that I wanted to do.
Is it the point that you couldn't get in the first time?
It's the point where I didn't actually try to apply first time.
Right.
I went to a good state school, and although my AS levels, because they existed at the time, give showing away my age, were fine. I was advised that they probably weren't good enough to apply to medicine. So I got my AAB at A level and went off to do my undergraduate degree in biomedical science. Did my undergraduate degree, had a great time, and then took the UK CAP and got into the graduate entry medicine.
Excellent. So, I mean, just to speak to you about the medical application process, for undergrads anyway, you have your personal statement, you've got your predicted grade, and then you do your aptitude test, whether that be UK CAT or BMAT. and then you go through an interview stage of being either in an MMI interview, which is
That's right.
multiple mini interviews, or you do a panel interview. So just to speak to you, Chris, specifically anything you think that there's wrong with the current medical applications process?
Oh, this is a whole can of worms. So you've things potentially wrong with every aspect of the application.
I completely agree with you.
From unconscious biases of teachers predicting grades for people. One of the big requirements for medical students in particular is having work experience in a healthcare setting. Some universities even mandate you a minimum amount of work experience. Now that's a lot easier to get if your dad's a consultant or your mum is a GP than if you're not from a medical family. You've also got these aptitude tests, and again, the questions have been shown to be biased unintentionally. And because of the market that we live in, you have preparatory courses for these admissions tests. So for a couple of £100, you could get a huge advantage on your peers.
Certainly. And whilst you've raised those issues, I completely agree with them. And there was just a couple of things that I'd like to add regarding that. I think that the prediction system is wholly subjective, and it's not it's intended to be objective, but it ends up not being objective, because ultimately a situation can arise where you have a good relationship with a teacher and they'll predict you a really good grade. And that's no good for anyone, because ultimately, and that puts other people at a disadvantage also. But it also could be the fact that you do really well in your A levels, but your prediction wasn't what you ended up getting. So it could be the case where someone's predicted AAB, and after their AS lower sixth level, they end up going and smashing their A levels, and from that point it's a bit too late because the application process is done. They then have to force themselves into an unwanted gap year to then apply again for medicine. So this is the other thing, that if you don't get the grades the first time round, you're also at a huge disadvantage, because a lot of universities just won't accept your application if you've reset your A levels as well.
So yeah, I know that some won't, but there are definitely routes into medicine where if you don't get the A level the first time round, you can go in other ways, or even some universities offer contextual admission or foundation years. My own university, Southampton. But speaking, one of the sound bites that I love to reel out when we have this discussion is that recently 80% of medical students came from the same 20% of schools. And that's because some schools are just geared towards getting people into Oxford, getting people into medical school, often independent fee-paying schools. So you're at a disadvantage there. But with predicted grades, if you haven't had someone get into medical school in 10 years, you might not put people forward for that. You might not encourage them, you're not predicting the grades that are necessary. Whereas if you get 50 through, it's just, it puts you in a much better position to be able to apply.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think another issue with the aptitude test and the interview process, there's no standardized way of doing it. And I think that again is a big issue. I think it's unfair to put students in a position where they actually apply to either one university that does UK CAT and another university that does BMAT, but they actually want to go to either one of them, but they can't because they need to then revise for two separate and completely different aptitude tests. And I think that's a huge issue that needs to be addressed within the medical application process. And ultimately, I do feel that the application process has to somewhat reflect what happens in America, where they do the MCAT, and then they get their as part of this process of enrolling onto a medical degree. I also do think that having not one specific way of interviewing someone is again another thing that will play into a person's decision making in terms of applying to a certain university. So just by listing 3 different things there, you've noticed like how stressful and how much actual work goes into really assessing whether or not you're going to apply for one medical school or another. That coupled with the fact that there's no guarantee you're going to get in, including with the fact that you are not, you might not get the prediction that you want, and then you end up having to achieve an offer which might not be for some reason feasible for you. However, in most situations, they end up making sure that the offer is reasonable. However, I do know some students from my universities particularly, they were given an offer of 2 A stars and an A, which after the whole process of going of applying to medicine is quite a substantial offer to make. Look at the amount of pressure that you're putting on students. And it also generates this kind of unwanted and unhealthy rivalry between students. And these are meant to be your potential colleagues in the future, but you've ended up being pitted against another student. And it shouldn't really be like that. This whole mentality about being super competitive when it comes to medical degrees and medical applications. And it's just not what the philosophy of the NHS is, being part of an MDT.
So yeah, what you say about the teamwork element of medicine and the hyper competitiveness of a medical degree where you're pitted against each other is completely right. I mean, when we're applying for our foundation doctor jobs, we are ranked against every single person in our medical school.
Yeah, just as we were
discussing, and that's how our jobs are largely allocated. So you are right, that's very competitive, and it's the antithesis of what we need in a functional healthcare team. But going back to your earlier points about different interviews, different tests, there are certainly some tests out there, like the GAMSAT, which is expensive and long, that price people out of going to some universities, and maybe people that need special considerations, around the exams that will disadvantage them. But otherwise, I'm actually going to have to disagree with you on that one. I think, it's unfortunate that there's no standardized way of getting people in, but it does mean that you get a big variety, a lot of different flavors of doctor. If people want 2 A stars and an A at one of the research-heavy universities that are driving people to become academic doctors, that might attract a certain candidate. Whereas for me, I loved the way that Southampton was interviewed. It wasn't an MMI, for example, it was a small panel. I loved the sort of feel of the place, and that attracted me there. Whereas for some people, a panel might be really intimidating, and they'd love that opportunity to have loads of different stations where they go in and they make a fresh start, a new impression, and are able to win people over and showcase their personality and their attributes in numerous different ways. So I think there are some benefits to having a bit of variation. So we don't just get cookie cutter doctors, and we get a real representative sample of the population that we're going to serve.
Sure, I can certainly see that point. But at the same time, I could see a student saying, I really want to go to Southampton, but I don't want to do the UK CAT because I want to just focus on one aptitude test, because I think I've got so many other demands, including A-levels and whatnot, that I can't actually end up going to Southampton, because ultimately it won't allow me to what I've already planned on doing.
Yeah, but no, you're right. There's no perfect solution. You are correct.
No, there isn't. But I think, of course, that there is certainly room for contention on the aptitude test and the interview, and whether or not it should be standardized or not. But ultimately, the predictive grade system is the one which I think is the most fundamentally flawed part of the selection process.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, Adi, and that is so important when everybody's upset about A-levels today. Hopefully, Chris, you wouldn't mind sharing your details with Adi and Jennifer to maybe continue these conversations another time. We're almost out of time, and I know that you need to hurry away, Chris, so we got to be respectful of your time. But Jennifer, really quickly in the last 5 minutes, because you've done a lot of research and you've looked holistically at all these issues in higher education, public health. Are you interested to find out from Chris whether he thinks what we are flagging up is relevant, where he disagrees with us, and maybe where he thinks that he would be interested for us to maybe do more research to consider? Would you like to have that conversation with him, Jennifer?
Definitely, that's a very good question and a very good talking points. I'd say public health is such a wide spectrum. It covers so many different things. What do you say are the main things to focus in, especially during the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, you're right. It's so wide and it's so important, and it's going to touch every student out there. So, I mean, the number one, the most frontal in all of our minds at the moment, and extremely important, is keeping COVID under control. We've got to make sure that we're given good teaching and ample opportunities via virtual meetings and things. So we can't be putting our health at risk in small lecture theatres, in substandard housing. So yeah, COVID at the moment has just got to be number one priority. But once COVID has passed, or maybe there's a vaccination, or things start to return to normality, I think the things that have been identified, like student mental health, is always going to be something that can be worked on. There's always going to be something that needs to be looked after. I think the things that have been mentioned around chronic conditions, for example, if you're diagnosed with it at university, there needs to be support there available for you, and there needs to be encouragement for schools to make reasonable adjustments, so that just because someone might be struggling to fit the normal timetable, it doesn't mean they should be kicked off the course or couldn't continue with their passion. I mean, and then you've got the things like homelessness, which it shouldn't be affecting any student, and is a real tragedy. So yeah, that's got to be a focus. I mean, I think everything that you've identified in the paperwork and the presentation that I've seen is relevant and is pertinent, and a lot of it is stuff that the BMA is doing work on. So if you would like to continue this conversation afterwards, we've got a whole team of students and staff, and we'll be delighted to collaborate with you.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I completely agree. Housing in particular has got to be a huge priority. It's awful that some students can find themselves, well, like the example I gave with the 22 unfinished student housing blocks. It's awful that students can arrive at university and not have anywhere to live.
Yeah,
and
right.
It's equally awful that there's HMOs, housing and multiple occupation, that are in such bad condition. There was a survey by Save the Students which listed the top 10 biggest issues in student housing, and right up there were dampness, rats, dangerous living conditions.
Yeah.
And that's nothing any student should have to face, along with the rest of the stress of university life.
Agreed. And unfortunately, it's not just private landlords that do it. We've, again, I'm going to go back to a Welsh example. We had some really dingy and unsuitable student accommodation given to the students by the hospitals that they were at placement at. So it affects us all, and it couldn't, it could affect anyone. It's just luck in those cases.
Yes, thank you very much. And well, it's now after 3 o'clock, so we finished now. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for you both coming, and thank you for raising the very valid points that you've raised, and it's been great to have you. And then thank you for the audience watching us. I hope you've enjoyed this session.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk, and I really enjoyed the discussion, and I learned some stuff, so thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for your attendance. It was really useful to kind of discuss this openly and candidly. And yeah, here at EB, we are obviously on a mission, and we continue pushing the agenda.
Definitely, and if you'd like to learn any more about what BMA is doing. Chris, could you just give any Twitter
Yes,
handles
please.
might worth following?
Very, very simple. It's at the BMA, at BMA Students. Or if you're a student, contact us at info.students@bma.org.uk. Or me at Chris Smith 2211. A little plug for myself. And I'd be delighted to answer any DMs on Twitter.
Thank you. And then if you want to learn any more about Educating Beyond Borders, we have a page on LinkedIn where we post regular updates and articles, as well as a Twitter, which is Educating BB, where we do the same as also a Facebook page called Educating Beyond Borders. So if you'd like to follow us on any of those, I'd highly recommend it. Have you got anything else to add, Addy?
No, that's okay.
Excellent.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming.
No, cheers. Thank you very much.
Hi there, Chris. Thank you very much.
No problem.
I hope you enjoyed that session.
I did. Yeah, I did. Thank you. Yeah.
It's, you know, what's really great is that an organization like the BMA, your students committee, for forgive me for saying, for students like us, it does seem a bit remote, and I think for our team it was really enlightening that there's a lot of points that you guys actually kind of felt the same way. So thank you. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I hope,
yeah.